I had always dreamed of escaping the chaos of city life and retreating to nature's solitude. So when I discovered an old lake house tucked away on a secluded stretch of shoreline, I jumped at the chance to rent it for a week. The house was charming in its weathered, rustic way, its wooden walls, creaking floors, and large windows offering a breathtaking view of the calm, reflective lake. The first few days were pure bliss, long hikes through dense pine forests, quiet evenings by the lake, and nights under a sky bursting with stars. But as the days passed, an unsettling undercurrent began to disturb the tranquility. It started with small details that I initially dismissed as quirks of an old house. One morning I found the back door slightly ajar, even though I was certain I'd locked it the night before. A chill ran down my spine, and I secured it again, attributing it to my forgetfulness. That evening, while I sat by a dwindling campfire on the small deck, I heard an odd sound coming from the direction of the lake. A low, almost imperceptible murmur that didn't match the usual nighttime chorus of crickets and rustling leaves. I strained my ears, trying to catch its source, but the sound faded into the night. The next day, during a solitary walk along the water's edge, I discovered something even more disturbing: a set of fresh footprints in the soft, muddy bank. They were unmistakably human, yet there was no sign of anyone nearby. The prints led directly from the shoreline toward the old boathouse, a decrepit structure that I hadn't noticed before. With a rising sense of dread, I approached the boathouse and peered inside. The interior was shrouded in darkness and disuse, but on the wall near the door, I noticed faint, scratch-like marks that looked almost like hurried warnings. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I could almost see a shadow flitting across the lake, or catch a glimpse of a dark shape standing silently among the trees. I began to wonder if the house's isolation was hiding secrets of its own, a troubled past perhaps, or someone who once lived there and never truly left. Then came the final, unmistakable sign. As I was packing up my things on the morning of my departure, I found a note slipped under the front door. It was written in hurried, trembling handwriting and simply read, "Don't forget." There was no signature, no further explanation, just a lingering message that made my blood run cold. I left the lake house immediately, driving away as fast as the narrow road would allow. Even now, whenever I catch a glimpse of a still lake or an old cabin hidden among the trees, I'm transported back to that week of quiet horror, a time when the peaceful wilderness revealed a side I'd never imagined. I'd always cherished the quiet refuge of the lake house, a rustic, weathered retreat inherited from a relative long gone. It sat on the edge of a vast, still lake in the remote woods, surrounded by towering pines and the gentle lap of water on the shore. I had returned there one crisp autumn weekend, seeking solace from the relentless pace of city life, convinced that the isolation would be nothing more than a balm for my weary soul. The first night was peaceful. I lit a fire in the old stone fireplace and sat on the creaking wooden porch, watching the stars reflect on the glassy water. The silence was deep, almost reverent, and for a moment I believed I was exactly where I needed to be. But by the second night, subtle oddities began to disturb the tranquility. I awoke to the sound of the front door creaking open. I was sure I had locked it before bed, yet there it was, slightly ajar. I checked every window. Each was firmly closed, no sign of forced entry. I chalked it up to my exhaustion and the quirks of an old house. The next morning, while walking along the narrow dock, I noticed something that made my heart race: a set of fresh footprints in the damp mud, leading from the water toward the back door. They were small, perhaps the size of a child's, and strangely deliberate. I tried to convince myself that maybe a local animal or an adventurous neighbor had wandered too close, but doubt began to creep in. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The forest, usually a comforting companion, now felt oppressive. I spent hours awake in bed, listening for any sound, any whisper of movement among the trees. Then just after midnight, I heard it, a soft, rhythmic scraping against the window, as if something were dragging itself along the glass. I flung my covers aside and peered out, but all I saw was the inky darkness of the lake and the dense silhouette of trees. The sound stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving an unsettling void in its wake. The third night, I resolved to confront the mystery. I stepped outside with a flashlight in hand and walked to the dock. The air was cold and still. I scanned the water's surface and the shoreline, but there was nothing, no sign of a presence. As I turned to head back, my foot caught on something soft near the water's edge. Looking down, I discovered a single faded ribbon, blue, frayed at the edges, as if it had been there for some time. I couldn't recall ever seeing it before, and its presence sent shivers down my spine. Disturbed, I spent the rest of the night restless, questioning my own senses. In the morning, I dug through old records and local news archives on my laptop. I uncovered a long-forgotten story about a young girl who had vanished near the lake decades ago. Her only clue, a blue ribbon she'd been wearing on the day she disappeared. The article ended ambiguously. No body was ever found, and the case went cold. I don't know if I'd imagined the whispers, the door, the footprints, or if the lake house held echoes of a tragic past. As the weekend drew to a close, I packed my belongings with trembling hands and left, my heart heavy with unresolved dread. Since that day, I've avoided returning to the lake house. I tell myself it was just a series of coincidences, a misinterpretation of sounds, an old door that creaks on its own, and the lingering memory of a local tragedy. But sometimes when I pass a quiet lake on a crisp autumn evening, I can't help but feel that in the depths of the silence, something watches, waiting for another soul to wander too close. I had always dreamed of owning a lake house, somewhere quiet, away from the chaos of the city, a place to unwind. When I found a secluded cabin by Blackwood Lake, it seemed perfect. The property was old but well kept, nestled between towering pines with a long wooden dock stretching into the still, black water. The nearest town was miles away, and the isolation felt like a gift. At first, everything was peaceful. Mornings were filled with the sounds of birds, and the lake was like glass, reflecting the sky. But at night, something changed. The air grew unnervingly still, and an eerie silence would settle over the house, as if the entire forest were holding its breath. It started small, a damp footprint on the wooden floor near the back door. Odd, since I always dried off after stepping out of the water. Then, small things went missing. My keys, a book I had been reading, a flashlight I kept by the nightstand. I blamed my own absent-mindedness, but a nagging feeling told me something was off. Then one night, I woke to the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps on the dock. My bedroom window overlooked the lake, but when I peeked through the curtain, there was nothing, just the empty dock stretching into the darkness. The water was perfectly still. I told myself it was a raccoon or some other animal and forced myself back to sleep. The next morning, I found wet footprints leading from the dock to my back door. I locked every door and window that night. My nerves were on edge, every creak of the old cabin sending a shiver down my spine. Then just past 3 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps on the dock. This time, they didn't stop. They continued slowly, deliberately toward the house. I held my breath, my body frozen in place as the footsteps reached the porch. The wooden planks groaned under the weight of something, someone. Then came a slow, deliberate knock. I didn't move. Another knock, louder this time. I reached for my phone, but there was no signal. My only option was to wait. Minutes passed, then hours. At dawn, I finally gathered the courage to check outside. The dock was empty. The porch was empty. But just beyond the tree line, half hidden in the morning mist, stood a figure, motionless, watching. I packed my bags that afternoon and never looked back. A few weeks later, curiosity got the best of me, and I looked up the history of Blackwood Lake. A girl had drowned there decades ago. Her body never recovered. Locals believed her spirit still wandered the shoreline, searching for a way home. I don't know who or what came to my door that night, but sometimes in my dreams, I still hear the slow, heavy footsteps on the dock, creeping toward me.